Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Well, as you can see, today I'm back over here by the Helix, and what we're going to do is make the final connection between the upper portion of the Helix and this end of the layout. Because in order for the trains to go somewhere, they've got to connect to the rest of the layout. And also that's going to allow me to bring trains up from the hidden staging yard and take them out onto the rest of the layout. So let's go ahead and get started with this part of the project. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Now before we get started, I do wanted to pass on a little bit of information for you. In last week's video, I showed you the new North American Transition Era and Modern Era figures from Model U. Now, one of the things that you can do is order those directly from Model U. And if you're in the UK, you can, of course, order from them or from the various dealers located around the country. However, in the US, there is an additional option. There is a company called Yarmouth Model Works located in Ontario, Canada. And I'll put a link to their website right here below me so that you can take a look at their product range. I'll also include the link in the description so that you'll have two ways of getting to that link. So take a look at that. They have a good collection, a good selection of the Model U North American Rail Crews, so you can order directly from a Canadian source. Unfortunately, there's none in the US yet, so hopefully we'll get there eventually. But for now, at least we've got another North American source. With that, let's go ahead and begin with the project here. Now I've got a pointer, and hopefully you'll be able to see this. If you remember where I left off with this, we had completed the Helix and had the upper section done to this area right back here. So right at this point, the top of the Helix comes to an end. So I have to have a ramp connection or a bridge, whatever you want to call it, that will go all the way out here and make the connection right here to the end of the layout. So that's the part that we're going to work on today. Now, as it turned out, there are complications. One of the problems is that the distance between the end of the Helix back under here and the end of the layout right over here turned out to be 8 foot 1 1/2 inches. So it couldn't be 8 foot, so I can make a simple cut. So what I decided to do was I was going to have to do some splicing. So I went out and bought another sheet of that $45 plywood that I used to build the Helix, and I cut two 4-foot sections off of the end of it. I think those are each 5 inches wide. And I spliced those together, and I'll show you that here in a minute. And then for the end of it, I added another piece of plywood left over from the Helix project. So I was able to create a piece that's 9 feet long roughly, and then I cut that back to match what I needed. So let me show you that. So this was a simple enough project that I went ahead and did it over the weekend just so I'd have it ready for you. I just used my Tight Bond 3 Ultimate Wood Glue along with the screws that I've been using here on the rest of the layout. So that way I had a good tight bond after about 24 hours. And this thing, it's very sturdy. So then I laid it out under the layout here. Where it's going to fit with a 2x2 brace to hold it up while I do the following work. So what am I going to do in order to support this guy in regular use? Well, that's where these come in. These are nice little pressed metal steel angle brackets, and you can screw them directly to studs in your wall. And I've used these on the layout. I've used the larger versions to hold the entire upper section of the layout in place. So it's supported on much larger versions of these. So what I'm going to be doing here is attaching these to the wall underneath of this bridge at about 4 different locations under here. And I've already gone through and I've marked the positions of the various studs here on the wall behind where this bridge is going to be located. So what we're going to do today is install these underneath of the bridge, get it stabilized in place so that next week I'll be able to do the rest of the work here. So right here is the location where everything comes together with the layout. And I've placed this piece of wood here at the end of this section of the layout. So we'll be able to make the connection right here. Now the first thing I want to do is attach this piece of 2x4 to the end here in order to serve as a support for the end of the bridge right here where it joins the end of the layout. So I've got some 3-inch screws to use for this. Get those started here so that we don't have to mess around with them later. And put them in here where I've got the location marked. Got to make sure that it's perfectly level with the end of the plywood. Okay, there. Okay, now let's drive these screws home. All right. Okay, so that serves as a good firm attachment point at this end of the layout for the piece of the ramp or bridge that we're going to install. So the next thing, I'm going to pop the bridge into place and start installing the shelf brackets that are going to hold it to the wall. Let's install one of the brackets to hold this bridge up. Now to hold it in place firmly while I'm attaching it to the wall, I've got my little spring clamp here, and I'm just going to clamp it to the deck of the bridge itself. And then I've got my Black & Decker electronic screwdriver and one of my sheetrock screws. So we're going to push this right in. Okay. And now we'll add 2 more at the top of the bracket. Now I can take that temporary leg out and let it sit on the bracket. It's nice and straight. Let's move back down the bridge a bit and do this again. Once more, I'm going to clamp the bracket to the bridge itself so that it stays level. And while it's firmly held in place, we'll get the screws to it. For those of you who are already asking about what about scenery, in order to get this section of scenery, I'll probably just use cardboard framers or forms of some sort and place it in here in order to disguise all of this wiring that's hanging down right now. But we'll get to doing the scenery much later. So now we've got 2 done, 2 more to go. And the next one is going to go back in here. So I'm going to have to get on my crawler and get underneath here in order to do that one. So hang in there with me. Okay, I managed to crawl up here underneath of the layout. And the first thing I want to do is attach this end of the bridge or ramp to the top of the Helix. So for that, I'm going to drill a couple of pilot holes with countersink, with my countersinking bit. And we'll run that screw in here, like that. And now we'll get that second one done. Okay, we've got a further attachment there. The next thing we'll do is we want to add that final bracket, shelf bracket right about in here. So let me make a measurement of where that needs to go in here and we'll be ready. Now the final bracket needs to go right here, so let me get that positioned. So let me get the clamp in place. Okay, and now first one. And let me catch this last one. So we now have a stable platform to lay track on. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but right there, our slope on this completed is coming in at 1.0. So a 1% slope, which is, quite a bit less than the full Helix. So trains coming up out of the Helix will have a gentler slope so they can transition to the level of flat running on the layout itself. So the final thing I need to do is connect the final section of the bridge to the block of wood that's going to be supporting it. So that's fairly straightforward. Just drill a couple of holes. And let me clean those out. Okay, I got the holes cleaned out, so now we can run the screws down in there. There we go. So my next project will be to take my Shoreform tool and cut this down all the way back to, about 3 or 4 feet back, so we can continue that shallow gradient up to the flat elevation of the rest of the layout. And for the rest of it, it's just pretty much a flat tabletop run through the first level. So that'll be the project next week, is I'm going to clean off the top of this benchwork. We will transfer the rest of the track plan to it, lay the track, which means getting this cut down and adding our cork road bed here so that we can transition down onto the bridge itself. So here's a final look at the transition from the Helix to the layout. We'll just do a pan here so you can see where the connection has been made all the way back there. And we're going to come around here, and we've got this shallow 1% gradient up from there to where we connect with the rest of the layout. Well, that's a wrap for today's video. So I hope I finally answered that question that you guys keep asking me, when am I ever going to finish the Helix? Well, this is it. So we now have the transition bridge here. It's a nice shallow 1% slope for this last transition section. So that's going to give us an easy transition for our trains coming up the Helix. They'll be able to get to the crest and then have a nice easy grade for that last run up to the visible portion of the layout. So next week, we're going to transfer the track plan to the layout and get some of that track laid, or at least get the cork road bed laid, and get that gradient cut down through the foam down to where it meets the end of our bridge here. So that should keep me pretty busy this week to get all of that done. So hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll be able to run a train up the entire Helix from the hidden staging yard out onto the rest of the layout so that it can head on down to Monroe Yard. However, there is another big project waiting for us down there, because there is a 4-foot hole in the benchwork where a bridge has to go. So before we can get to Monroe Yard with the train, I've got to build a big bridge down there. So that's another big project coming this fall or winter. So hang in there with me. In the meantime, have a great weekend, have a great week. I'll see you here next week with another video from the DCC Guide. Bye now.